Okay, so the purpose of this video is an introductory tutorial for those people who are unfamiliar with using Onshape. We will show you how to make a new document, how to create a CAD drawing in that document, and how to turn that CAD drawing into a three-dimensional object that you can download to a 3D printer and create. So once you've logged into Onshape, your opening screen on a laptop should look something like this, right? These are the documents you've already used. In this case here, this is from my Year 9 Robotics class, so it's stuff that people have shared with me, but if it's your own account, it'll just be your stuff. If you want to make a new one, rather than opening the existing document, you go to Create, you pick Document, you give it a name, so name, tag, and if you've got multiple folders, you pick which folder it wants to go in. I don't want to put it in the Year 9 Robotics folder, so I'll press Home, and I'll put in the one called Owned by Me instead. And then press Open and Create, and give it a couple of seconds, and it should open up the new document called Name Tag. Once you've opened up your new document, it'll look something like this. So this is your three-dimensional workspace. If you want to move that three-dimensional workspace around, you hold down the right mouse button. Remember, we said that using a mouse is the best way of doing this. So hold down the right mouse button to move it and rotate it, or you can press on this cube here if you want to move it as well. In our main screen, we can see we've got these three flat surfaces. These are called work planes. You've got a front one, a top one, and a right one. These are where you do your drawings. It doesn't matter which one you use for this. So I'll just pick the front one. I'll click on front there, so I'm facing towards it. And I want to create a new drawing, which we call a sketch, right? So this is going to be my sketch. So I'm going to basically do a simple name tag here with my name on it and a hole to put like a key ring through or something like that. Before you start drawing a CAD drawing, you should really give some thought to the dimensions of your design, right? You know, draw it out on a piece of paper using a 1:1 scale. See how big your object's actually going to be in real life, because when you print something off, 3D printing takes a long time. If your object is too small or too big, you're not going to know about that until after you print it off, and then you're going to have to go back and start the whole thing again. So I did a quick design on a piece of paper earlier, and from that I worked out that I probably want my tag to be about 9 or 10 centimeters long and about, I don't know, 40 or 50 centimeters wide. And the hole in it should be about 6 millimeters. So I've done my design. I know roughly what it's going to look like. So I've pressed sketch. Before I start doing my sketch, it says select a sketch plane. So in other words, which one of these three flat surfaces are you going to do it on? So I'm going to do on the front one, so I click on front. And now I just draw my sketch in. So the first thing I'm going to do, these are all my drawing tools up here. I want to draw a rectangle. So over here, these are my rectangle tools. I'm going to click on the drop-down arrow and pick a center point rectangle. A center point rectangle draws from the center, which is right here. So I'm going to click on that, drag out my rectangle. So the easiest way of doing this is just to drag out a random size and then resize it afterwards. So that's going to be my rectangle there. Down the bottom here, the box wants me to type in how wide I want it to be. So I'm going to make it like, I don't know, 90 millimeters or 9 centimeters wide. So all the measurements should be in millimeters. So I type in 90 there, and I'll make it like, I don't know, 50 tall or something. There you go. So that's my main rectangle. But then I'm going to put on another rectangle on the side that I'm going to turn into where the hole goes for the key ring. So I'm going to put another rectangle. I'm going to pick corner rectangle, and I'm going to click on this corner here because I want to start my new rectangle from the same corner. So this is where my hole is going to go for my key ring. So I'm just going to drag it out to roughly the right size. Click. Now I reckon I'll make that about, I don't know, 25 millimeters wide. And then I'll make it 50 because the main part's 50 as well. So I type in 50 there. There we go. So when you do that, you get these little dimension arrows showing how big everything is. And I'll just move those direction arrows so they're not in the way. So I can see that both rectangles are 50 this way. This rectangle is 90 that way and 25 that way. Looks pretty good. From there, the next step would be to put in the hole for my keyring over here, and based on a little bit of fiddling around, like a 5 or 6 millimeter hole is going to be pretty good. So I'm going to go over here, pick the circle tool, going to put the center of my circle on this blue line, which is the center of the rectangle. Click and drag, click, and then it's going to ask me for the diameter, like how wide my hole is going to be. I'm going to call it 6, press enter, and the only other thing I probably want to do now is get that hole in the middle, because you can see at the moment it's not in the middle of that rectangle. It's not the end of the world, but it looks a bit messy. So the way that I would get that in the center, the easiest way of doing it is to use the dimension tool. So the dimension tool is this one here. And it allows you to set the distances between different objects in your CAD sketch. So I'm going to pick that, and I want it to be exactly halfway between the two sides of this rectangle. So the rectangle itself is 25 wide this way, and half of 25 is 12.5. So I want it to be like 12.5 centimeters from here to here. And that'll put that circle exactly in the center. So what I do is I don't actually click on the line, I click on you have to click on the dots for this. So this is one of the corners, so I'm going to click on that, click on the center of the circle, and now I get this little arrow here which shows us the distance between those 2 points. So at the moment it's 14.25. I want it to be 12.5 because I'll put exactly in the center. So that moves it. And if I wanted to adjust that because I wasn't happy with that, I could double click on that to open that box up again and put a different number in, for example. So that's called the dimension tool. So that's looking pretty good. I kind of want this to be rounded over here, I reckon. And I also want the corners here to be rounded as well. Makes it a nicer shape. Also, when you're 3D printing, unless you absolutely have to have sharp corners in your design, you tend to get better results if the corners of your shape are slightly rounded, because 3D printers don't like really hard 90-degree turns. They can look a bit messy sometimes, particularly if you're trying to print fast. So I want to do some rounding here. To get like a nice round shape here, what I'm actually going to do is make another circle that goes around this circle. So I'm going to pick the center point circle again, start it in the center, and I'm going to make this circle go like all the way out across the rectangle. So I'm going to click there, and I'm going to make that 25 wide, because the rectangle is 25 wide. So that's there, and then, and this all seems very complicated. Once you've done this a few times, you'll start to get an idea for like, what's the best way of making a shape. And I'm not the world's greatest expert. There's probably more efficient ways of doing it than this, but this works good enough. So I want to kind of round it off like that. So I'm going to go to the line tool here, and I'm going to draw a line from there to the circle, and then another line from there to the circle. All right, and that bit there where my mouse is going to be where the name, the edge, where the keyring goes basically, right? That's going to be that bit there. So what I need to do is get rid of this stuff now. So one of the ways you could do that is get the trim tool. The trim tool is like scissors. So you pick the scissors there, and anything you want to get rid of, you click that. If you stuff up, you can always undo it to go back to what you had before. But I'm just going to undo that, that, and that. Now I've got a nice rounded part for where my keyring is going to go. So that's looking pretty good. Like I said, I wanted to make some of these corners rounded as well though, because 90-degree corners don't play nicely with a 3D printer. So I might leave these ones as they are, that's alright. But I want to round these ones off rather than having a sharp 90-degree turn there. So if I want to round corners, the tool we use is called Sketch Fillet. It's this one here where my mouse is. So to use the Sketch Fillet, press on it and click on the two sides. And then from there, you can drag this in and out, or you just click and pick a number. And I'm just going to put 5. The bigger the number is, the more you round it off, basically. So I'll put 5 there, and then do the same thing here. Do that 5 as well. And that looks pretty good. So far so good. If I printed that off now, that would just be like a blank name tag. It'd be pretty boring. So I want to put some lettering in here, and I maybe want to have like a border around the outside of that lettering as well. So I'll do the border first. To do the border, I'm going to basically use this offset tool here. For the offset tool, you pick that, and then you click on the outside, like that. And you can see that when you do that, you get a border, and then you've got an inside part. See that? You can see that there in blue. So that's the offset. Now, the information you need is the offset number. That's basically how far it is from the inside to the, from the outside to the inside of that border. At the moment, it's 5 millimeters, which is probably a little bit too much, so we might put it back to 3. So that looks pretty good. About the only thing I'd probably change there would be, again, sharp corners. I was kind of hoping the offset might put the curve on the inside as well, but it hasn't for whatever reason. Sometimes it just won't work. So what I'm going to do is get that sketch fillet thing out and then round these corners off as well. And then just do it again, again, and again. Alright, so that's looking pretty good as well. So now the last thing we need to do is just get a name on it, and the design itself will be finished. And then from there, turn it into a 3D object and print it off. So if I want to put some text in, click the text box, click and drag, and then put your name in. So like that. You can change the font and the bold and all that stuff, but that'll do for the time being. And generally what happens is you get completely the wrong size. So you would think, like if you were doing a text box in like a Word document or something, you would think that you just drag the corners, but in Onshape that just moves it, it doesn't resize it. So dragging the corners moves it. If we want to resize it, we have to use that dimension tool. So I'm going to pick the dimension tool, click there, so click on the 2 corners of the text box. That's way too big. So I might set it down to like 75 or something. Remember that if you want to resize it, you can always double click on the dimension and type in your new one. So that doesn't look too bad, except it's done that thing it always does where it's decided it doesn't want to move now. So maybe we should have been a bit... So we're going to undo that. Try moving it like that. And then try resizing it again. So let's set that to 75. Is that going to work for me? Sort of. Alright. Close enough is good enough. I don't want to make this video too long. The text thing is a bit of a pain. I've never quite perfected it. But anyway, that looks okay. It'd be nice if I could center that. But I'm not going to bother trying to do that now because the video will be too long, but that's good enough. So in that case, my CAD's picture is basically done. So I've made all these changes. To save it, I press tick like that, and then that's my design, which was called Sketch 1. If I wanted to go back and make any changes to that, I could right-click on it and go to Edit, and it opens it back up again. But let's suppose I'm happy with that. The text not being in the center is triggering me, but I'm not going to spend too long on that, so we'll just stay with that for the time being. That's just a flat drawing though. That's not something we can 3D print out. So to actually make it a 3D shape, we've got these tools now. Once we've done the sketch, you get new tools up the top once you've finished your sketch, and these are for 3D design. These are, the one we want to do is called Extrude. So Extrude, you click on that, and then you click on the things that you want to turn into 3D shape. So what I want to do is I want to have the base here, coming out a certain distance, but then I want the border on the outside to come out further, and I want the letters to come out further, so the letters stand out from the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on all the bits I want to be the background. So I've clicked on these 3 bits here, and then where it says depth, that's how thick it's going to be basically. So 25 is way too thick, that's 2.5 centimeters. I'm going to set it to 3 millimeters like that, and then press tick. So now that's a 3-dimensional object, but that's only part of the keychain, the name tag. The one thing you'll notice is once you do an extrude like that, your sketch becomes invisible, right? I can't see the rest of the sketch anymore. But I can go over to here where it says Sketch 1 and unclick the eye like that. So now I can see it properly again. So I've only extruded or made 3D part of that sketch. So what I need to do now is extrude the rest. So I've done the background, I've made that 3mm thick, and now I'm going to do the outside border and the letters. And I want them to come out further, so I'm going to make them a little bit thicker. So I'm going to go to extrude. When I do this, I'm going to pick add. If I pick add, it's going to join these new bits to the existing 3D object there. Because remember, by the end, we want this to be one piece. So I go to add, I'm going to click on that bit, and I'm going to click on as many of the letters as I can. This is a bit fiddly. Is that going to work? No. All right. Sometimes you can't do it all in one go, so you just do it as little bits. All right, so there we go. So, oops, and I've stuffed it up because I've made it too thick. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to extrude. I'm going to edit it. I don't want it to be 25mm. I want it to be a little bit taller than the background, but not too much. So I'll set it to 5mm instead. All right, that looks better. So we're getting there, but it's not finished yet because I haven't done the letters themselves. The letters are just holes in the 3D design at the moment. The other thing that's worth noticing here is we've got 3 parts, part 1, part 2, and part 3. And each part has a separate color. So we don't want 3 parts, we want 1 part. So we've got some work to do. When we've joined everything together, they will all be the same color, rather than 3 different colors here. So now I need to go to extrude again, make sure I've got add ticked, and I'm going to click on these letters if it's going to let me. That worked. Let's tick that. Yep, that looks okay, except I made the same mistake I did before and forgot to set the depth. So let's set that back to 5. Okay, that's looking pretty good. In fact, that is almost done. The only problem is it's still 3 parts. The inside of the O here and the inside of the R are separate objects to the rest of the key tag. So if we printed it off, we wouldn't print off one thing, we'd print off 3 separate objects, which is not what we want. So the last thing we need to do before we're ready to 3D print this is to use what's called the Boolean tool, that's this one here, to join them all together. So Boolean is basically a fancy name for joining things together. So I get that Boolean tool and I click on all the things I want to join together. So on the light blue one, click on that, the dark blue bit inside the O, and the bit inside the R. And make sure it's set to union. If you've done that properly, it will join all 3 of those bits together into one part, and you should be able to tell that because they should all now be the same color, which it is. So we click tick. That's my 3D design. Rotate around it to make sure it looks okay. Yep, looks pretty good. So in that case, now we just need to 3D print it. So there are 2 ways that you can do that. You obviously won't have access to the 3D printer yourself, so you'll need to get a teacher, i.e. me, to do that for you. So there are 2 ways that you can do that. You can go to Share Document and then type my email in there, graham.low408@schools.sa.edu.au. And when you do that, make sure the Can Edit thing is selected as well. Because that way, if there's something wrong with your design that needs to be fixed, it stops it from being able to be 3D printed, I can go in there and change it. Whereas if you don't have the Can Edit selected, then all I can do is view it and 3D print it, but I can't fix it if there's any problems. So that's one way that you could do it. Share it with me, and then I can 3D print it. Or if you wanted to do it for yourself, then you need to export it, download it on your computer basically in the correct document format. So to do that, you go to the parts over here. So the parts thing is basically all of the different 3D objects you have in your design. After joining all those bits together, we have one part, which is called part 1. We right click on that, and we pick export. When the export comes up, you give it a name. Calling it Part Studio 1 Part 1 is not a good idea, because let's say that you were sending this to me to 3D print and everyone in the class is doing that. I'm going to have 20 odd things all called Part 1 or something like that. It gets very confusing. Instead, I would suggest calling it something like, say, name tag Mr. Low. All right. And then make sure the file format is set to STL. The STL is the special kind of file that most 3D printers accept for 3D printing, right? So name tag, Mr. Low, STL, then you go export, and it will download that STL onto your computer. So if you click on that, it opens up a 3D viewer so that you can 3D view it. But in terms of getting it 3D printed, once you've got that STL, you would send it to me, and then I would send it to the 3D printer and get it done. It's up to you how you do it. It's probably better to share the document with me, because if there's a problem with an STL, you can't really edit it beyond basic operations. If there's something seriously wrong with it, you can't really fix it, is what I'm trying to say. So there you go. That's a very simple introduction. If you haven't done a lot with Onshape, or you've kind of forgotten how to do it, I would suggest going through this activity, creating your own name tag following the same kind of ideas. Make it about 10 centimeters long and about 50 wide. And then if you want me to 3D print it, send it to me, and then I can get it 3D printed over the next couple of days, providing it's not too big. Okay? Thank you for your time.